What's going on, you guys? It's October 4th, Tuesday, and this is Daily Log episode 22. Today we're going to cover what happened on US 500. And from yesterday's video, I pointed out that we would trade higher into the buy side liquidity resting at 37.37. So that target was achieved, I believe, overnight. That was pretty cool to see. Still no trades for me. There just wasn't anything clear or really that predictable for me. I'll show an example of what possibly you could have gotten into. Going into tomorrow as well, it just it seems to me if there's no setup tomorrow, it may be a no trade week for me, just pretty rare. But there's a ton of news this week, NFP on Friday, so some weeks are like that, and you just have to be able to be okay with it and understand that it's all part of the strategy. You don't always have to make money every single day, every single week. And it's a hard thing to do, easy to say, but it is hard to do. Let's get into the daily chart. So we expanded above the fair value gap. I took it away. We expanded above that. What I would do is maybe watch that area for price to dig back into, possibly to send price higher. But the reason I'm so I guess neutral, and not even neutral, I mean just currently, like today, right now. But overall, I am bearish, and we are trading inside of this fair value gap on the weekly time frame, which is amazing to see. I love that. I still believe we're going to trade lower. I like the way that we traded right into the equilibrium of it. So we'll have to see how the next day or two plays out. But as of now, I'm quite neutral, to be honest, besides being bearish. So looking at the daily chart, looking at the previous swing high, so this dealing range from the swing high here down on the swing low, we're inside of a premium. I see one other PD array that we could align with, which is this little fair value gap here. Somebody told me to take a look at ES, so let me do that real quick. Somebody told me there's a volume imbalance on ES. Not that I could see. Okay. So looking at that daily chart, pay attention to this fair value gap here. Honestly, I'd rather see price just trade lower, but we're gonna have to see what happens. This could be a potential area of interest for me. What I really wanted to note, I'm gonna do something a little different here today. You can use the dollar index as a opposite correlation. And the reasoning we've been so bullish is because the dollar's been so bearish over the last couple days here. Looking at the dollar, I don't like the way we traded super deep, but I do, if we end up closing the week out, closing above or even inside of this fair value gap, that could maintain bullish. I'm still bullish on the dollar, which would be weak on futures or indices. So that's good news for us. I hope the dollar does continue going higher. We have, I believe, the jobs claims tomorrow, USD news. So definitely pay attention to that. Let's go into the 4-hour time frame. So I was mentioning the buy side liquidity resting here at 37.37. It's pretty easy to identify and know that we're going to trade up into that. There was nothing in here for me to really get into, even though I knew price, or I had a strong feeling that we were going to trade up into this level. There was nothing that the model presented, and for me, this is just coming from experience. I used to be like one of the hardest things or pills to swallow, because I was like, man, I know where price is going. I know exactly where it's going, but there's no model, there's no criteria, there's no nothing. And that really just comes down to discipline, your psychology, because those rules are set there in place for you to follow because they protect you, they protect your capital. Nothing's ever a guarantee. Like, even though I knew or had a strong feeling we're going to go to 37.37, there's nothing that qualified me to get into the trade. Yeah, I could have just entered a buy-in and just had a wide stop loss with no criteria just to target the buy side liquidity, and then price hits your take profit. You don't feel fulfilled doing that. If you ever get into a trade where you don't follow your rules or criteria and you win, that's actually a negative loss to you as a trader because you're not following your rules and you're getting this false sense of basically confidence, but in reality, you didn't follow any of your criteria. You just gambled. So, looking at the next objective, like I said, I think I said this last week, but I said pay attention to this high here. This is a point of reference, buy side liquidity resting here. And then I said we were coming into this fair value gap. So now we're residing from this low here down to the high here. Extend that out in time. We are now residing inside of that. I would rather see price punch up above it. What I'm looking at the 4-hour structure, unless we get super aggressive, like if we just start melting away, then obviously this wouldn't be valid. But I would be looking for tomorrow a possible run higher. It just seems to me like this is super bullish. No, this is not valid. If price came all the way down to this fair value gap and this breaker, that's to me, I wouldn't even acknowledge it, to be honest. I think we're way too deep into discount. I'd rather see this stay open for price to be bullish. I would watch a couple of these fair value gaps are really not the cleanest, but watch this area and then watch this area right here from this high to this low here, that high and that low. So watch price if it dumps into it. Watch on lower time frames if we get a nice bullish displacement. We could get that bullish displacement into this high here that we created, and then the high here. So let's go into the daily time or the 1 hour. Like I said, mentioning the 1 hour time frame. Yesterday I was looking at the buy side liquidity here to be ran, and there's just nothing in here that provided a nice setup. I mean, there's a nice little fair value gap here that price just kind of quickly dipped into and then expanded higher. The only viable setup, and I'll go into it, to me, was this little dip into the fair value gap on the 15-minute, and then price ran higher. I didn't participate in it. I was off the charts by that time. It was in the PM session. So let me go into the 15-minute here. This setup right here, I know it seems very, very small, almost insignificant, but let's say we didn't run this high yet here at 37.37. Let's say this little model here took place underneath that high. I probably would have took a trade today on this. Reason being, we have our dealing range low to our dealing range high. Price comes into a discount. Look at our order block here. OTE, and you're targeting buy side liquidity. Now, is that the YouTube model? No, but understanding narrative, understanding where price is drawing to is more important than anything. And you could have multiple models, but highly recommend just to stick with one model and stick with those rules and criteria. But that was pretty cool to see. I don't think there's anything super significant on the 5-minute. On the 5-minute, we did run out the sell stops here. So this could be the YouTube model in a sense, but there was nothing in here for me to really want to get into price. And we displaced higher if we go down to like a 1-minute or a 2-minute. There just wasn't anything in here that I really liked. Like if we displaced higher, stopped, came back into the fair value gap, and then ran higher, that would be nice. We ran out the sell stops, displaced higher. There's a little fair value gap here on the 1-minute that we used a few times before displacing higher. So dipped into that once, twice, and then ultimately expanded higher right at the open. Looking at the 1-minute, there's a couple opportunities. For value gap here, we dipped into another one here. And to me, looking at this, it seems to me like I would feel like I'm chasing this, and I don't like that feeling. I think we're just so overpriced here. I didn't want to try to long this, even though that's probably the best opportunity and best thing to do rather than shorting. But that's an opportunity there on the 1-minute for a little bit of a scalp. Everything was basically off the table after we ran 37.37. If we stayed underneath that prior to New York session, I would have been probably participating today. But going back to the 15-minute setup, 15-minute, looking from dealing range low to dealing range high, we dip into a discount, the low of the fair value gap here. And this is all coupled with a 30-minute and I believe the 1 hour fair value gap. So that's a pretty strong indication. So we just dip ever so slightly into that. Expand higher, you could have been targeting the buy side liquidity resting above the dealing range high there. So that could have been a potential long. But to me, it's just not the most high probability. And I was away from the charts at this time. This was at noon for me. Looking at the 5-minute, after we displaced higher, the only indication, couple down close candles, so your order block here, extend that out in time, retraced into it. Looking at the dealing range, I wouldn't have taken this trade unless we were maybe coming back into this fair value gap here, which we already used once. So nothing super significant, and that's okay. Some days are like this, some weeks are like this, and experience will ultimately be the best guidance for you in these times. I stated earlier that in these times when price is really just running to an objective with basically no retracements into a discount, it's best to just submit to higher time frames. So I'm submitting to this weekly time frame and I'm watching it. I'm seeing how it plays inside of this fair value gap. If we get a really nice down close candle tomorrow, then you know what? We may be bearish and that would be the best opportunity. Looking at it, I'm just neutral. I really don't know, guys. Like I said, this is my objective for right now. The buy side liquidity resting here right at 38.18. If we can get down into one of these fair value gaps here, expand higher above the buy side liquidity, run into this remaining portion of the fair value gap, and then see our displacement lower, that would be great. This just doesn't feel like a top to me. This doesn't feel like the high, quote unquote. So this is what I would be looking for if we were to go short overall on that weekly time frame. This is what I would be looking for. So somewhere in here, that would be the best setup for me. And like I said, if we ultimately do just for some reason displace lower, then we can look at it in the morning and kind of gauge where we're at. So that's going to be it for me tonight, guys. Until tomorrow, good luck and good trading.